Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Where you gonna be tonight? Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. There's magic coming. Get ready for the rest of your life.
Hello and welcome to SassafrasCast. This is a podcast full of witchy insights to help you lead your sassiest life. I am Rory Kelly, a tarot reader, singer-songwriter, and all-around personal growth nerd from Long Island, New York. In a moment, we will begin the Witchy Weather Report, but first a shout out to my patrons. Several of whom have been hanging out with me in, I don't know, let's call it like the podcast green room. Because I am going through my own Five of Pentacles moment this year, and having some craziness with my own bummer tarot card, like personal real life experience, and helping my cat recover from surgery. So while I was cat sitting, we just did a couple of card pulls, before starting the actual podcast, because I knew the second I hit record, my poor cat, who's recovering from emergency surgery, would do something terrible, would like knock over the room divider or eat the mic cable or something like that, which my beloved patrons got to watch her try to do exactly that. So thank you all for bearing with me, as I go through my human craziness this week. All right, shout out to my patrons. So, if it's not obvious, I record these episodes live. My patrons get a private YouTube link before each one so they can tune in for the live recording, hang out in the chat, ask questions, and get them into the show in real time. Questions and comments, I definitely have included both because my patrons are some, wise-ass humans. Not wise-ass humans like smartasses, although some of them are that as well, but I mean very wise humans. As you can tell, I'm a little loose today because it's been a wild couple of weeks. Anyway, patrons also get access to my Discord server where we talk about all things witchy and wonderful, and a shout out in each episode. Here we go. Thank you, Russ Green, Amanda Little, Patty Bell from soulshepherd.love, Melissa Marie, Rachel Miller, Anti-Fragile Tarot, Grayson, Savannah Tillett, B from Whimsical Weekend, Millie Orozco, Ruby Marchetti, Brittany, and Hannah Westlock. I'm so super grateful that you are in my world, and I'm honestly so grateful for the community we share. Our Discord server, we show up, we support each other, we goof around with each other. It really feels like a gathering of friends, and it's really special to me. All right, time for the Witchy Weather Report. So, Mercury is once again in Gatorade. If you're listening to this in real time, I know some people go back and listen to podcasts from the beginning. If you're listening to this from some point in the future, hi, how's the future? But if you're listening to this in real time right now, as I record this, it is January 15th. This podcast will probably go out publicly on the 16th. Mercury is in Gatorade once again. I'm not going to spend a million years talking about that. I think at this point, Mercury retrograde is part of the public lexicon. We all kind of know what to expect, like glitches in technology, people we thought were out of our lives texting us, that kind of thing. I will tell you, though, that Tess Whitehurst is running a Mercury retrograde challenge, which in my opinion is a super bold move to run a challenge at a time when technology is known to mess with you. Like big witch energy, if ever I heard it. And the challenge itself is no joke. It really invites the very type of shadow work that Mercury retrograde is actually so terrifyingly good for. The action for the first day was to place a phone call. I'm already upset as a millennial. To place a phone call to an old friend or old frame, to reconnect with someone. Tess Whitehurst is not fooling around. That is flat out terrifying. But I do like the kind of approach of if you can't beat them, join them. Let's do Mercury retrograde with intention. Let's dive right in to all the kind of stuff it brings up. And that kind of matches up with our topic for today, which is about embracing and surrendering to the energy of the bummer cards of the tarot with some level of trust that what does not kill us makes us stronger, and that this will teach us something and make us better human beings. However, first, let me pull a card for us. Let me do the Witchy Weather Report. I'm reading today with my old reliable Everyday Witch Tarot, which is a real go-to for me if you're a regular listener of the show. King of Swords. So let's talk about truth and let's talk about facts versus fiction, because the truth will set us free. That is really the message that the King of Swords has. The blessed clarity that the King of Swords has. Now, I realize that life is not always like this. Life can be messy, right? It's not always super clear to be like, this is the one true action. But the King of Swords has faith that there is one right action, and that if you apply yourself to paying attention and sorting through the details, that you will arrive at that truth and you will begin to move forward, and that the truth can set you free. And, this doesn't mean that it's always super clear. You don't always know what the one true action is, right? But it is true that the truth sets you free, and it is true that committing yourself to learning, committing yourself to a practice of listening. The King of Swords is a speaker as well as a tremendously good listener, without putting anything on it, right? The King of Swords wants the facts, not the feelings. And that can seem cold, but it's also can be very freeing to be like, I'm just going to listen and I'm just going to accept what is. And accepting what is and trying to do my best within the framework of truth is what is going to free me to take the best possible action I can in the moment. Yes, Grayson's in the chat saying the king says vaccines are real. Thank you. Yes, the king does say that vaccines are real. This is a scientific development that we developed as human beings, as a human race, to help us get through difficult times like global pandemics. They are literally there to help our immune system show up and do battle with these things, so that those of us who really can't afford a big illness are able to move through a pandemic safely. And so that those of us who maybe can but don't wish a big illness on others in our life, on young ones, on the elderly, on people who are immunocompromised, can do the right thing and help us, be immune and healthy. I'm a big yes. Get vaxxed, man. I'm vaxxed and boosted, and I got COVID this year. But I'm grateful that I'm vaxxed and boosted, because I'm sure it would have been worse had I not been. And because that, it's still an improvement. The numbers are very real, and you can look them up. You can look up the numbers of the percentage of people who have been hospitalized and people who have tested positive, vaxxed versus unvaxxed, and it's considerably more likely that both will happen if you're unvaccinated. I care about you. I don't want you to get hospitalized. I don't want you to get COVID if you can avoid it. Let's get vaxxed. Sorry, I don't mean to be political. Wait, yes, I do. I don't care. If you disagree, I allow you to disagree. Anyway, sorry. Grayson made that comment, and I'm like, yes, the King of Swords agrees that vaccines are real. Okay. But let's move into the topic of the day, because I did not mean to start by, making perhaps what shouldn't be a polarizing statement, but unfortunately is in the moment. Today's topic is about the bummer cards of the tarot. So the four that come to mind are Death, the Devil, Ten of Swords, and the Tower, although I'm sure all of us have our individual bummer cards that follow us around, that are more or less scary for different people. So I'm talking in general about these cards in the tarot. And I want to be clear about my intention here. First of all, I'm talking about this as humans going through our lives, as humans actually living these experiences, right? Because the tarot is a deck of archetypes meant to represent real human experience to the best extent that it can. I'm not talking about what happens when you get a scary card in your reading. There are a lot of podcasts that are there to talk about that for tarot readers. I'm talking about what happens when you are living through the reality that those scary cards represent, and how can we find grace and healing in those very challenging times. And I really feel like the last 2 years and change, we're in month 25 of 2020 right now. We've been living through those bummer cards and grappling with it in real time, both on a cultural level and on a personal level. And so I feel like it's worthwhile to discuss what we can do to find grace, to find healing as we move through these different situations. And I want to be clear about how I want to present this. I am not interested in doing like a toxic positivity or spiritual bypassing type of episode. These cards and these experiences that they represent, they are dark and they are upsetting for a reason, and pretending that they're not dark and upsetting doesn't do anything to help us heal or help us grow or help us move through them. That said, there is also a point of view that says growth starts when your comfort zone ends, like get out of your comfort zone. And I'm also here to say that deliberately shoving ourselves out of our comfort zone repeatedly, that can be a form of self-harm. we need to practice discernment here, and we need to walk a healthy line between those two viewpoints where we are willing to recognize and engage with the real shitty shit in our lives, like to be honest with ourselves about it. And yet also give ourselves permission to step back and give ourselves care and kindness and detach if it begins to feel like it's too much. At the core of shadow work is an understanding that growth can happen when we engage honestly with our negative emotions and experiences, and also that growth happens best when we do so in a loving way. Re-traumatizing ourselves repeatedly isn't growth. Only you know your limits. If you are someone who has trouble being kind to yourself, I recommend enlisting a friend who wants the best for you, or visualizing what kind of healthy limits you might recommend for a child or friend that you cherish and know well. So that's really what this episode is about. It is about walking that line as we move through our challenging times, where growth can happen with a ton of compassion for ourselves. So I'm going to talk about the big bummer cards of the tarot. The top 4 that come to mind, like I said, are the Tower, Death, the Devil, and the Ten of Swords. Yet there's an understanding here that there are other cards that can come up that can be a huge, scary bummer for someone going through them. Personally, I am walking through a lot of Five of Pentacles energy myself at the moment. And if you're a patron, you have heard me kind of walk through it in real time in my Patron Palooza posts. You know, I'm kind of practicing this stuff that I'm going to talk about in this episode in real time, just trying to keep my head above water. You might have a bummer card that stalks you. I have a friend who has the Nine of Swords as a constant stalker card, or a card that just fills you with dread and stress, you know, that's not listed among those big 4. Or you might be aware of a negative pattern you possess that is like associated with a particular card. So for me, Ten of Wands comes up for me a lot if I am grappling with workaholism and burnout that like touches on one of my own negative patterns. And Seven of Swords comes up when I'm grappling with the feeling that in order to be accepted and successful, I can't be my true self, that feeling of having to put a mask on to be acceptable. And you may have your own cards like that that really represent like an ongoing struggle in your life. And so I've put some thought into trying to, even though I will go through those top 4 bummer cards, like I want to talk about making this episode's advice useful for any card. And really, again, I'm not just talking about the tarot cards here. I'm talking about the situations they represent. You know, we don't turn to tarot because it's pretty pictures that distract us from our lives. Sometimes probably we do, and that's okay. Sometimes it's good to just look at pretty pictures and distract yourself. But mostly we turn to tarot for help understanding our lives, right? We turn to it for guidance and compassion as we are going through things in our lives, some of which are going to be shitty and you know, deeply challenging. So I'm not just talking about the cards in this episode. I'm really talking about, you know, these life experiences. If you're not a tarot reader, if this all feels a little over your head, because I will be making a lot of references to the tarot, this episode is intended to talk about those experiences and situations, not just the cards. And I'm here to say, if you're going through a tough situation, it might even be helpful and validating to kind of take a whirl through the tarot deck and see if there are any particular cards that feel like what you're going through, and maybe even work with those cards for a little bit of insight and self-care. I'm going to include in the show notes a link to all 78 cards and their meanings. I'll even pop it into the chat for patrons who are there with me. It's at tarotcardmeanings.net/tarotcards.html. It just has a .htm, not HTML. And it just has, you know, all the tarot cards and the classic Smith Waite illustrations as well as meanings. By the way, I'm looking at the chat. Savannah's saying my guide card for this year is Death. Girl, I'm right there with you because my guide card for this year is the Tower. So shout out to bummer cards as guide cards. I will say I've had some bummer cards come up before as my guide card, which if you've been following me on the Witchy Weather Report, I use a guide card to basically be a guide for the year. So not necessarily predictive, more like what energy do you need to embody this year. And I have to say a couple times I've gotten quote unquote bummer cards as a guide card, and those years have been incredibly transformative. You know, because a little bit it gave me the motivation to deal with stuff that had been affecting me for a long time, and like kind of show up earnestly and bring my best self to it. All right, so let's have a quick overview of the big 4 bummer cards. I'm going to start with Death. So The classic one-liner that you have probably heard people say about the death card is, death doesn't have to represent literal death. It represents change. It doesn't have to be scary. And I'm here to say that's true and it's not true, right? It's true that death does not have to be a scary card. And it's true that it does not have to be about literal death. Death could be about something as innocuous as, like, comparatively, as like leaving a job. And in fact, if you're leaving a toxic workplace or leaving a toxic relationship, death might be a really healthy card to have come up in your reading. It might be a great card. It might be a positive card. But I have also had it come up in readings where it really did represent grief, a person that my client had lost, or perhaps the grief of lost possibilities for a relationship that got cut short, or a dream that got cut short. Death is about a definitive ending. It is about a we can't go back moment. And because we naturally resist change, that's going to be scary to us no matter what. If we are looking for grace and insight from the card and the situation that death represents, well, for starters, I will tell you there's a whole death positivity movement, which is fascinating to look into, that literally honors death as an important part of life and celebrates the fact that it encourages us to enjoy the time we have in life and with our loved ones. So look up death positivity movement if you want to explore that a little bit. It's really interesting. I had a friend who actually invited us all to a death day dinner on her birthday, because this is what a wonderful and cool, weird human she is, and literally had us all celebrate and honor death like we had a death positivity birthday for her. It's a really interesting movement. Death can also represent graduation day, literally or figuratively, right? Once we've had a graduation, we can't go back. We can never be a student of that particular institution again. And again, that's literally, figuratively, like we can't go back to where we were before. That can be very nostalgic and it can be very bittersweet. But it also literally represents a milestone of growth, right? It represents us ascending to our next stage of our lives. We close one chapter, we enter another. We can honor that. And a way that we can find some healing around these events in our lives, whether they're big or small, whether they feel more positive or negative, is by giving ourselves a pause, giving ourselves a ritual. We do this very literally with funerals. We have funerals and we have celebrations of life and wakes and the sitting of Shiva and traditions like that. We specifically give ourselves a pause to honor the transition that is happening, to honor and celebrate our grief. And I often use those words, celebrate grief, which I know sounds like an oxymoron, but I think it's very important for us to hold space for these feelings and to really allow them to shine in both the pain and the beauty of them. I have learned that in Jewish culture, it is a common thing to say, may their memory be a blessing when someone has experienced a loss. And I think that's a really beautiful sentiment, and it's also a bonus that it doesn't enforce a particular type of belief, because, when someone is grieving, it's not the time to talk about their beliefs. It's the time to just show up for them compassionately, in my opinion. But it honors the really positive impact that the lost person has had on life, and allows a way for that to transform from a relationship of a real living, breathing relationship to a blessed memory that brings us comfort, that brings us wisdom in the times that we need it, a way for that person to continue to touch our lives. And that's kind of what I mean when I talk about celebrating grief. So I think creating a space for ourselves to kind of give ourselves a ritual around these death events in our life, these events that death represents and the tarot in our life, can be a really wonderful way to begin to start a healing process. It doesn't mean it's going to be smooth sailing. I'm not doing the toxic positivity thing, but it allows us to show up a little bit for the impact that experience had on us, and therefore the impact that the ending had on us. And I want to encourage us to feel free to do this, not just for the obvious stuff, right? There are these publicly sanctioned grief events like funerals, like celebrations of life. But I'm here to say that your grief is still important and deserves to be honored, even if it is a grief no one else has heard about, if it's a private situation that you don't feel comfortable sharing, if it's complicated grief because you had a difficult relationship with, with the person or situation that you are grieving, if it's grief that's not for a person, but for lost hope, but for what could have been, if it's grief that is like kind of not always accepted and viewed by society as grief, you still get to grieve it, and you still get to create this ritual and space for yourself to kind of celebrate your grief, to acknowledge what you're going through. And in so doing, we make room for ourselves to move forward whole, as whole people, rather than compartmentalizing this feeling that we don't quite know what to do with. We're telling ourselves that our whole, flawed self deserves moving through this next chapter. We are accepting ourselves and our lives as is, and we are choosing to find joy where we can in it. And that's very powerful. It's interesting. I'm just reflecting on the fact that Savannah in the chat, you said, my guide card for the year is death. I would love to hear how you're working with death as a guide card. I'm really curious about that, if you feel comfortable sharing. I'm going to take a sip of water because hydration, kiddos. Let's talk about the Tower. So the Tower is a card of chaotic change. It was also my guide card for the year, so that's fun. That's an adventure. At its best, the Tower may reflect chaotically leaving a harmful relationship or a harmful situation, an unpleasant but necessary endpoint to any situation in your life or globally that has grown toxic. Myself and several friends of mine have received the Tower as a guide card over the years. And we have worked with the idea of literally being called to put a stop to toxic situations in our lives, even if we have to do so chaotically, like giving ourselves permission to do it messy. Like we have to end this situation and it's going to be messy, so let it be messy, instead of having to try to do it perfectly, which doesn't always get results. And a quote that comes to mind is Martin Luther King saying, "The riot is the language of the unheard." When we have tried all of the calm and polite ways to resolve a situation, when we have tried all of the proper channels to resolve a situation and they're not working, sometimes our only option is the chaotic, destructive energy of the Tower. Sometimes we just need to be like, well, guess what? Even though it's not the proper thing to do, this situation needs to change right now. And that never feels good. You never feel good when you're in a situation where you have to do that. On either side, it doesn't feel good, right? And I mentioned riots. I do associate the Tower with social justice riots over the years, and recently with uprisings that take place after the correct ways of going about creating change have already been tried and frankly haven't gotten the results. Nobody's happy in those situations, but sometimes it really does feel necessary, because just living with a toxic situation that is harmful is certainly not the right path, right? So if you are having a Tower situation in your life, we can find hope by looking for helpers, looking for people who really do see and understand the toxicity of what needs to change. People in your life, either literally or mentors maybe that we experience in the media or in fiction, who affirm to us that we do deserve better. At its heart, the message of the Tower is that we deserve better, and it's time to end this bullshit. And I'm going to pardon my language in this episode. This is an episode about extreme circumstances, and extreme language is going to happen occasionally, because that really is what communicates the true meaning of these cards. It's an inherently extreme card because it deals with inherently extreme situations. Pretending these situations don't exist doesn't serve us. That keeps us stuck. But honoring the fact that we can show up lovingly for ourselves, even in times of chaos, is beautiful, even when we have no idea what to do, even when we're doing things that we never thought we would do. Giving ourselves the gift of standing up for ourselves affirms our self-worth and allows us to grow into the biggest and best versions of who we can be, and teaches us who we are, teaches us our values. So there's the Tower for you. Let's talk about the Devil. I have to say that this is a card that doesn't scare me a ton, and possibly it's because I was not raised Christian, and so I don't have a lot of big scary feelings around the archetype of the Devil. But for many, seeing the Devil come up in a reading makes people really, really freak. And it does represent dark stuff. For many, it represents addiction. It represents the way that we enslave ourselves. I expand this definition to represent any spirals, fear stories, self-limiting beliefs, and behaviors that we can be prone to falling into. And that's different for everybody, right? I know at this point in my life as a 37-year-old woman, what my spirals are, like where I go when I am in a bad space. If I'm going to make a mistake, like here's the list of mistakes I'm likely to make, right? And when the devil comes, it's an invitation to kind of dance with those behaviors and beliefs and ideas that dog us, It's an opportunity for us to engage with those ideas and to see if we can grow a little bit. And it's really, really tremendously important that we acknowledge progress made rather than grade ourselves pass fail on this. It's really easy to ask ourselves, like, why am I still grappling with this? Like, it's been X number of years. Why is it still coming up for me? And it's really important to recognize maybe it is still coming up for you, and maybe it will for your whole life. Like big stuff in your life is like that. It can take a lifetime to work through. But if we grow a little bit each time, if we acknowledge that maybe this time we're a little better than we were last time, maybe we learned one key thing about ourselves that will help us on our journey, it's really important to celebrate that progress because we're dealing with stuff that is hard. We are playing life on super expert mode when we deal with the devil because we're dealing with stuff that specifically hits our weaknesses. So it's really, really important to celebrate when we make any kind of progress at all on that journey. I don't think it's a reasonable goal to completely eliminate those stories, to completely eliminate those emotions and experiences that are essentially a part of being alive and being human. But getting a little bit better every single time as we grapple with it, like that's a very worthy pursuit. And I'll also take a moment to say, it doesn't always need to feel terrible. Gallows humor exists for a reason, and it has gotten a lot of us through these last 25 months of 2020. My friend Judith, who has a devil lover's birth card, is always quick to remind me that the devil can also represent humor. And psychologically, it has been said that humor is a coping method that helps us deal with topics that we're actually most uncomfortable with. So that's really interesting. I do think about that, like the things that make us laugh, reflecting, the areas that we actually grapple with. And this is a gift, right? Like this is this beautiful, quirky gift that allows us to grapple with these deep, frightening topics in a way that can actually feel joyful and lighthearted. So we know that bringing a light heart to your dance with the devil can actually allow you to really grow, and it can actually feel like let you feel good about the experience of growth as you grapple with trauma. What a gift, because often the work doesn't feel good. Now let's talk about the 10 of Swords, and then I'm going to come back to death for a moment because Savannah has shared a little bit about her experience, and I want to share that with you. I think that's really interesting. But let's talk about the 10 of Swords. This is a personal stress card for me because I am someone who is really most comfortable being in a partnered relationship, which doesn't mean I'm not capable of being a solo person, right? But I know that is the thing that kind of serves my psychology best. And the 10 of Swords does not just represent heartbreak. It represents broadly betrayal by someone we thought we could trust, and the kind of pain that feels like we will never feel good again. We've all been there. Or if you haven't been there, like, I'm glad for you. I honor your innocence. And it's a real bummer card. The gift of the 10 of Swords is all the beauty that we notice in our life when we are so down that any tiny bit of joy feels like a blessing. Dar Williams has a beautiful song. It's called The Blessings. And she talks about getting your heart broken and it going kind of the worst possible way, like all the horrible things happening in one fell swoop. And then noticing small things like a flock of birds flying off of a tree and how beautiful it is. It's a beautiful song. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. It's really about how these small, seemingly innocuous blessings, they remind us when we are feeling broken that we still have the capacity for joy. They give us this hope that perhaps we can be mended. We can still feel a little bit of joy, so maybe our joy can grow again. Maybe we can feel like ourselves again in the future. Some phrases that are common in these moments in our lives are, "This too shall pass," and "Time heals all wounds." Reminding ourselves that we will once again feel better is something that we can really hold on to in these times. As well as those small, beautiful day-to-day blessings that we actually might not notice if things were going well in our lives, because frankly, when we're not heartbroken, like, we don't need them as much. So in a way, it is also a beautiful opportunity to learn how to live in the moment and to learn how to take whatever joy comes your way, to really be like, yes, I'm going to grab on that joy because it's what I have right now. I'm going to share too, Savannah mentioned in the comments that death is her guide card for the year. And here's what she says. I am doing a deep dive study on the death card this year, turning to it for advice and comfort, journaling through my experiences, and trying to embrace the energy of it from all angles. I really love that. And I love the idea of turning to a card that is traditionally a negative card for comfort, because I think it's very real and very possible. Like finding the comforting in these situations. What a blessing. What a source of strength and resourcefulness to be able to do that. So now I want to talk more broadly. I want to not have this be a laundry list of these different tarot cards and how they affect us. I want to talk about broadly, how can we work through whatever real life bummer situation, which may be represented by a tarot bummer card, is affecting us. How we can find insight, how we can find healing. A little bit later, I am going to share with you my method for doing meditation with the tarot card, which I have found to be really helpful, in particular in dealing with like these bummer cards. And you better believe when I pulled the Tower as a guide card that I was already planning that meditation. And I did. I did a meditation. I actually took a little bath and did a nice meditation. And it really did help me gain clarity as to what this card could teach me over the year, how I could engage with it in a way that felt healthy for myself. But also, so that's going to be my Which You Got This section. I'm going to give kind of a step-by-step for that. But let's talk about some other ways we can heal. Self-reflection, journaling, creating any type of art, whether you intend to share it or not. Spending time acknowledging how we really feel and what we're really going through is by nature a healer. For pretty much every situation I've found, it's really important to be compassionate with ourselves, to give ourselves the validation, to say this is hard, to acknowledge we're not wallowing, we're not just lazy complainers, we're going through something that is big and hard. The beautiful thing about art in particular is that it feels like it holds our pain up to us in a mirror. It's hey, here's the pain you're going through. And the tarot does this too, sometimes obnoxiously. But in a way, somehow this makes us feel better because it allows us to know we're not alone, right? As soon as we see this reflected back to us, we're like, oh, I'm not the only one who's ever been through this pain. And to know that, we can know, okay, we're probably going to be okay again at some point. Other people have seen this pain and survived it, so maybe I can too. And also it takes away that feeling of is there something wrong with me for feeling so hurt? No, there's nothing wrong with you. We're human, right? So engaging honestly with our pain, it's not the same thing as wallowing. On the contrary, naming our experience for what it is, this is a way to offer ourselves kindness and compassion. It allows us to integrate the experience into a part of our personal growth, rather than allow it to become stagnant and compartmentalized and something we deny and push into our subconscious, because that's when stuff really hurts us. When we don't deal with our trauma, it goes into our subconscious and comes back up to haunt us when we really could least use that kind of haunting. Now, I'm going to say that doesn't mean we should constantly be working on our self-growth mojo when we are facing a hard situation. Sometimes all we can do is get through it, and that's really okay. But I do believe that choosing to acknowledge that we're going through something and choosing to name our feelings around it allows us to have a depth of experience that's a little bit protective against this coming back to haunt us because we didn't deal with it the first time. Now, I'm the first to traumatic experiences are traumatic no matter how well we handle them. So I don't want to put any pressure to grade yourself on how well you're doing your traumatic situation. Let's be gentle with ourselves. Let's seek the company of others who are gentle with us, and let's avoid the company of people who would be harsh on us at this time. Let's celebrate the small comforts that come to us along the way, whether it be gallows humor or a friend who cares enough to check in with you and asks you to text them even if it's 3 a.m. if you need someone, or a song that makes us cry, but it makes us cry in a way that makes us feel like our pain has been witnessed, like we have been somehow validated and confirmed. We may or may not find inspiration in the stories of others who've gone through something like it. This is where self-discernment comes in. Because at times it can be very helpful to see a story, a movie, a book, a song of someone going through what we are going through and coming out the other side stronger. At other times, this might feel like trauma on trauma and you're like, nope, I just need a break. neither of these feelings is incorrect. Like, please do the thing that feels best for you. And like, good news, if you feel that you've misjudged it and you're like, oh, I thought this would make me feel better and it actually made me feel worse, like, the good news is you're allowed to change your mind at any time. You're allowed to never watch the end of that movie. For me, it's Jessica Jones. It's a really good series and I really like it, and I really couldn't keep watching it because it just made me feel worse, not better, because it really does deal with trauma quite a bit. And I've given myself permission not to watch it, even though it's probably, even though like on some level I would enjoy it, because it doesn't do the right thing for my mental health. So I want to give us permission when we're navigating these very dramatic chapters of our lives to not have to do so perfectly. If we're perfectionists, maybe this is the time to cut ourselves a whole lot of slack. Maybe this is not a time for like accountability practices, unless there's an area of your life that feels really good and like it's going well, and it's healthy for you to kind of disappear into that area of your life for parts of your day to remind you that not all of your life is suffering. And let's like walk a healthy line about that. For me, there are times when overwork has been a problem behavior for me. But there are also times when my work has been a real blessing to lose myself in when I'm going through like a challenging situation in my personal life. You're the one who knows what's right for you, and it's okay to not get it right every single time. When we get it wrong, we get an opportunity to learn, and we know better for next time. So again, let's celebrate progress made instead of beat ourselves up. I want to throw in a comment here that I think is very wise from Savannah, which says, I try and remind myself, you must feel to heal. I love this. I love this as a catchphrase because I'm prone to pushing my feelings down and ignoring them. Me too. And I think there's a real pressure, especially like we're both Americans. Like there's this like kind of puritanical ethos still in America where, like stoicism is rewarded and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and like, don't complain about your problems, just get through them big and strong. And it's like, we know that kind of like denial doesn't serve us. It can make our trauma way worse. So I really love that. You must feel to heal. All right, let me take us into which you got this. This is a segment of the show where I share one practical idea that you can implement in your practice right this minute. And a little bit about how it's worked for me. I mentioned that as soon as I pulled the tower as a guide card, I was already planning my meditation with it. And I'm going to describe the type of meditation that I do in these situations, which is a meditation you can use for any tarot card. It's especially useful, I find, when you are touched by one of these bummer cards. It's also useful if you want to if you have a problem card that you don't really understand if you're a reader, it's helpful for those situations too. Whether it's a guide card, if it's an advice card for you, a card you're just trying to understand a little better, a stalker card, or maybe you just straight up came across it in the deck and you're like, yep, that's me right now. When you're having this experience, I think a meditation on the card can be more valuable than ever because it almost trains ourselves to put us into a reflective state around these circumstances, allowing us to respond rather than react to it. Because we're meditating, right? Like we're training ourselves that we can meet this in a meditative way rather than an anxious, reactive way. And we can meet it from our inner wisdom rather than from our stress. By the way, I'm going to say $5 and up patrons, you are going to get this as a literal guided meditation in the bonus episode. It's going to be downloadable so you can use it whenever you want. And it's going to be a flexible enough meditation that you can use it with any card. So I'm going to literally guide you through it. You can just press play and do the thing. But for everyone else, here's the framework to DIY this, to put together a meditation for yourself around this card, whatever it may be. Okay, for starters, I want to say the deck that you choose really matters if you're a deck collector like I am, especially when we're working with one of the big bummer cards. That imagery is naturally scary and potentially triggering. Our goal is to invite this card to tea, to dance with the devil, so to speak. So in other words, to engage with it in a somewhat detached way, not to trigger ourselves, which won't help. So it's really reasonable and wise to choose the less frightening of your options. If you have a couple of different decks and one of those cards doesn't scare you as much, pick that one. We don't need to always push ourselves to do the hard thing. And or if a particular version of this card feels particularly meaningful to you, maybe the artwork really just kind of pulls at you, or maybe because it's the deck that you keep seeing it in, so that has a meaning. That might be a good reason to choose that version of the card. I want us to tread carefully here, because the tarot is archetypal in ways that speaks to our subconscious very deeply. And that means it can touch our trauma. So if you have fear that doing this type of meditation might do that, first of all, it's super okay to not do this practice. It doesn't mean you're a bad personal growth person or not doing your shadow work or whatever. It's healthy for you to know your limits. If you do want to move forward, I'm going to suggest safety methods, to put safety mechanisms in place for yourself. For starters, make it clear to yourself that you can stop anytime. No harm, no foul. You might even want to set up a rescue or escape scenario in your mind where if this meditation starts to go south, if you start to feel like this is too much for you, that you can literally visualize a way to pull yourself out of it ahead of time, so you can kind of like a safe word, press that button and get out of there whenever you need to. And this is similar to how some psychologists recommend dealing with nightmares. While you are awake, visualizing a different end to the dream, one that empowers you rather than frightens you. So similarly, if you might get triggered by this, let's envision an empowering way to get ourselves out of there if we need to. You may also ask a guide that you work with and trust to go on the journey with you, or you might kind of create the persona of a guide or protector just for that purpose, for this meditation. Also, let's set up some real world support. Let someone that you care about, who cares about you, let them know you're doing some work that might upset you. Ask them if they will support you if it does, and call or text them before and after. The sandwich text is really powerful. It's a technique that I use a lot with a couple of friends of mine. When one of us has to do something that's kind of daunting, kind of a challenge for us, we will send 2 texts. The first is, I'm about to do the thing. And the following text is, I just did the thing. And the person on the receiving end, their role is to ask us how we're feeling, to tell us they're proud of us, to generally be a compassionate support human as we face this challenging time in our lives. This is a great, structured way we can show up for each other. Okay, now let's get to the here's how we're going to do this meditation. First, I want you to spend some time just examining the card. Let's do this in a calm and detached way. Maybe even naming aloud some of the imagery that jumps out at you. What if we approach this as naming it and describing it the way that you might if you were describing a piece of art to a friend over the phone who had no visual reference point? Putting ourselves in this mindset, this kind of I'm explaining it to you, it helps us detach a little bit. It can also help us notice things that we might otherwise not notice, which is helpful. We're going to do a meditation. It helps have some cues for our visualization. And also think of the advice people share to look for the helpers in times of crisis. Are there things in this artwork that actually give some idea of hope or help? A little bit of grace in a rough situation. I'm thinking of, in the Ten of Swords, in the Everyday Witch Tarot, there is this little crow that's leaning on a tree branch looking over the person who has been stabbed by a 10 swords. Nobody wants that. That's a bad situation. But I really look at this crow, it doesn't look like a bummer crow, like a bad omen. To me, I really look at it here's a friend. This crow is witnessing, your struggle and cares, this is a little bit of compassion, even in your moment of pain. So are there things like that in the artwork of this card? Things that could be helpers, things that are a little bit of grace. It's really worth reminding ourselves that these things exist even when our times are shitty. So let's talk about our visualization. Let's visualize entering the card in a safe way. Let's think of it like entering a dreamscape where we cannot be harmed. We're just viewing, and we have control to leave at any time. We might choose to bring a guide or protector with us. And it's helpful to have some on-the-way visualization. So looking at the card's imagery, maybe that means you walk on a path until you get to the card. Maybe you open a door. Maybe you climb or descend some stairs, something that helps you get there so you can kind of get the visualization going a little, get your mind in the right place before you get to the meat of it. We might also wish to visualize a method of bailing if things get too tense. So an escape route or a poof, we're out of here, kind of effect that you can call in if needed. Then we're going to walk into this card. And the idea is to have a frank and honest discussion with the figure on the card. Let's suspend our disbelief for a moment. Let's decide that we can freeze frame what's happening, disregard the laws of gravity, for example, if we need to. This is your meditation and you can do what you want. We're going to talk to the figure or figures on this card Kind of the way that we might talk to a friend of a friend that we're hoping to get to know a little bit better. Let's assume that even if this is a scary card, that the person we're talking to is like reasonable and likable, someone that we can have a good conversation with. And if this is a bummer card, this person might be in some amount of distress when we come to them. So let's also offer them some compassion. What questions do we have for them, especially if we're going through something like this ourselves? Some ideas might be, how are you feeling? What would help you right now, or what is helping you as you go through this? What is this teaching you? What are you learning about yourself? You might wish to share your own experiences around this bummer card and ask if they have any advice for you. Let's take our time with this and just have a conversation. And, you know, sometimes this can really give us some insight. When you feel like your conversation has reached its close, it's time to end the meditation. So you might actually choose to end it benevolently. You might choose to like rescue yourself and maybe offer rescue to the character on the card, the same way we talked about choosing an empowering ending to a nightmare, right? Maybe we can be like, hey, guess what? Like, I've got a white horse that's going to ride in. You want to ride out with me? Maybe it's even insightful to see how they respond to this particular offer of rescue. Maybe it will teach you something. I'm going to say, like, be sure to move back along the path if you can, the way you came in. The path, the stairs, the door, whatever it is that got you into the card, because that can give our brain a little bit of closure. Like, it's an epilogue. It's like, yep, this experience is over now. We have a beginning, we have an end. Now we can start to process it. So then at the end, then we do kind of our processing. That might look like journaling. It might look like texting or calling your support human. It might look like just talking through your thoughts in a voice recorder. Why not use modern tech, right? Or you might, want to do something a little less verbal. You might want to like take a long shower or take a long walk or cook a meal that you love to cook, so that you can kind of think it through as you're going through familiar and non-threatening motions. That can be really healthy. Also, while we're on the subject, I read this really interesting article that said that playing video games, in particular it was Tetris, that was in this study, can help keep trauma from coming back. So if you're in the moment of trauma, if you're experiencing trauma, that playing video games actually helps us. Perhaps it's the detachment, like I don't know the reason for it, but like going and playing some Tetris while you're experiencing a traumatic event in your life can actually help us move through it, and not have it kind of come back to haunt us and be as harmful to us in the future. I think that's really fascinating. I just wanted to share that since we're talking about trauma so much today. Anyway, I encourage you to follow your instincts about the best way to kind of process what's coming up for you. For this, to go back to the meditation, I've used this practice with every single one of my guide cards. And especially I found it really necessary with the kind of bummer ones. And it really has brought me a level of clarity and insight that I didn't initially get just looking at the card and interpreting it. So and in so doing, I therefore felt calmer about the situation. I was like, okay, now I have a better understanding. And for me, when I kind of have a game plan, I feel calmer. Okay. I want to thank you for spending your time with me today. I especially want to thank my patrons who were around for a kind of pre-game version of this podcast where we were just kind of pulling cards and goofing around as I was looking after my cat Kaylee, who is currently recovering from emergency surgery. Thank you all for being here through my own human messiness. And you, listener, thank you for being here with me too. Thank you for meeting me human to human in this digital format. If you like this podcast, please rate it. Please review it wherever you listen to podcasts if you can. That really helps. It's a nice thing to do for a podcaster that doesn't cost money. And if you could take a moment to even share it with someone that you think might enjoy it, I'd be very grateful. If you would like to support this podcast financially and unlock exclusive benefits while you do so, you can visit patreon.com/SassafrasTarot for $1 a month or more. It will unlock you extra content, personalized card pulls, a witchy Discord community, access to the backstage pass every time I record a show, and more, kind of whatever I dump in there. I'm doing Patron Palooza right now in January. I am making a post every single day where I pull a card of the day and also talk about kind of a related topic. And it's like really fun. I'm really enjoying it. So now is actually a great time to join if you've been thinking about it. if you have a question or idea or suggestion, or like want to talk about, like if you want to share like an experience with a bummer card, I would love to hear it. You can email me anytime at sassafrastarot@gmail.com. By the way, sassafras is spelled Sassafras, and tarot is spelled Tarot. I'm the person who branded myself with 2 incredibly difficult to spell words. That's who I am. You can follow me on social media at Sassafras Tarot on Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, YouTube, and Twitter. And if you would like to order a reading from me, you can do so at etsy.com/shop/Sassafras Tarot. As always, I am going to take us out with a song. If you like it, please consider searching for me wherever you listen to music. My name is Rory Kelly, RorieKelly. You can also visit my website, rorykelly.com, or find me on your favorite social media site. On Facebook, Twitter, I'm Rory Kelly. On Instagram, I am at Rory Makes Songs. Thank you so much for listening. We will talk again soon. Okay, so here's the song I'm going to play. I'm going to tune up this guitar a little bit because I suspect that it needs it. I'm going to play you a song called Vulture. This is really a song I wrote kind of grappling with my own dark stuff, my own dances with the devil, I guess you would say. And I just want to share it as a kind of snapshot of what that experience has been like for me. And hope that it touches something in you and offers you some healing. For me, I believe that is the reason I'm a musician, is that music is the best form of healing magic I have ever found in my life. It has saved my life, and I wanted in on that magic. So this is a song called Vulture. I got a vulture in my heart. Feeds on pain, she feeds on scars. Tries to make me think we're one and the same. But I am not, I am not, I am not, I am not you. I am not, I am not, I am not, I am not. Oh, mother, the sky is calling me. What else could I do? Father, I'm trying anyway, 'cause I learned that from you. I had to let it go too. I learned it before I had words to say no. I learned it slipping under my skin in the summer. Myself around the paradox that I am not, I am not, I am not, I am not you. I am not, I am not, I am not, I am not. Oh, mother, I'm sorry. I don't know what to give you. Oh, Father, I'm trying anyway, 'cause I learned that from you. I had to let it go too. What do these words mean to you? What do these words mean? A bridge and a bird and a diamond at its throat, and the glittering stone keeps it close to the boat, and the sun goes down every day around 3, and it rains and it pours and it storms, and the bird don't ever break free, though it is not held by a leash, and the bridge waking up your mind. I do not intend to make mine. Oh, mother, the sky is calling me. What else could I do? Oh, Father, I'm trying anyway, 'cause I learned that from you. I had to let it go too. Thank you starting to lose my voice a little bit. I am recovering from COVID, and so I've noticed that my vocal stamina is not what it once was. If you want to hear a rocked out, full band version of that, you can find it on Spotify by searching my name, Rory Kelly. Thank you for hanging with me. Thank you for spending time with me. Thank you for going deep with me today. It's been really meaningful to get to share with you. It's been really meaningful, especially that it's not a one-way conversation, especially with my patrons. I love the conversations we have. I love the way we show up for each other. Thank you. I wish you well. And I'm going to take you out with Savannah's words. Remember that you must feel to heal. Take good care of yourselves. Look after yourselves. Farewell.